everyone, do you remember 2019? The biggest problem was fake news and racism in Canada, right? Right? If you paid attention to the news, that was the biggest problem facing Canada. And Catherine McKenna said again and again, according to CTV News, McKenna denies claim carbon tax may exceed $50 a ton. And here's Pierre Poilievre, and he says the plan is not to increase the price post-2022, said Catherine McKenna before the election. Now, after the election, Trudeau says they will indeed raise it 160% above its 2022 levels. Here's Aaron Werdick, and he says, weird, this wasn't mentioned anywhere in their platform. They just ran on last year. How odd, right? Ottawa to hike federal carbon tax to $170 a ton by 2030. This makes us not competitive. This makes us not able to compete with the world. This makes us poor. This makes us not able to sell our wares because we have to give 30% to the government. To do what with? I don't know. It's not reduce emissions because BC's had a carbon tax for a decade, more than a decade, and they haven't reduced any emissions. It's just a quasi-economy that gets to be like laid over top of the other economy that you and I don't get to buy into because we're not entities, right? The entities get to trade money and carbon swaps and all sorts of other stuff. And you know what that means, right? Money out of our pockets into their pockets, and we don't get to play that game. Okay, here's Brian Lilly, and he says, Trudeau breaks a promise with a massive carbon tax hike. The Canadian economy has been battered and bruised over the last year as the country deals with the ravages of COVID-19. At every level, governments have been spending never-before-seen sums to keep businesses and workers afloat, and even that might not be enough. You can't replace an economy with government handouts. You can't. You can't shut people down and funnel them all to Walmart and other big box stores while saying they're safe to be at in the hundreds where the small stores aren't safe. You can't do that and replace it with handouts. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. You will get a very poor outcome. Back to this. I have no fear. Justin Trudeau is coming to the rescue with just the right thing to help. A giant increase in the carbon tax. Trudeau announced on Friday his government will raise the carbon tax from the current level of $30 a ton to $170 a ton by 2030, with increases each and every year, depending on whose price calculations you believe. That is between 36 and 40 cents to a liter of gas. Never mind all the other price increases we'll see. You see, everything is trucked in Canada. Most things are trucked, okay? And if the price of gas increases, then the price of trucking things per kilometer increases. If the price of getting your wares to the store increases, the price to consumers increases. So that means more money out of our pockets and to gas. And what is gas? Gas is mostly taxes, right? Carbon taxes and other taxes, right? So money out of our pockets paying for more into government coffers. You see what's going on? Okay. Funny thing though, back to the article, this is exactly what the Liberals said they would not do ahead of the last election. In June 2019, Trudeau's then Environment Minister, Catherine McKenna, dismissed a report by the Parliamentary Budget Officer saying that to meet Canada's Paris Accord target, the price on carbon would need to rise to $102 a ton. Forget 102, let's make it 170. Let's make it $200 a ton. Forget that, let's make it $1,000 a ton. Then nobody would ever use their cars and we'd win and everybody would be happy and liberal. And nobody would have cars. Anyway, back to this. McKenna said that at the time, the government has no plans to increase the price post-2022. For Conservatives to suggest otherwise is simply false and misleading. The plan is not to increase the price post-2022, McKenna said in July 2019. Our position has not changed, McKenna said a month later in August. It all reminds me of another thing McKenna famously said, quote, if you repeat it, if you say it louder, if it's your talking point, people will totally believe it. McKenna's famously boasted in a Twitter video. Yes, and echoing the propaganda ministers of eras gone by, right? Well, enough voters believed it, but then again, the Liberals were aided and abetted by the media on this. Several so-called fact checks were done on the Conservatives' claim that the Liberals would raise the carbon tax to $102 a ton after the election, and each one said the Conservatives' claims were false and misleading. Turns out that the claims were false and misleading, not because the Liberals wouldn't boost the tax, but because they were boosting it to $170 a ton rather than $102 a ton. Yeah, bait and switch, right? Bait and switch. It's unbelievable that we believe them, right? They keep abusing us, and we keep believing that they would never do such a thing. They would never do this to us. Why would they do this to us? Why would they do this to us? Darshan, I'm not going to try that, says, in the wake of revelations that the Chinese army has been training in Canada against the wishes of our army's top brass, our Minister of Public Safety issues a statement about Bugs Bunny. Bill Blair says, did you know that the new voice of Bugs Bunny is one of Scarborough's very own? Great timing, I guess. This is 22 hours ago. This is the most important thing. It's very interesting having the government deflect like this, pretend like it's not happening. Sorry about this. A tab was out of order, so I'm just gonna carry on because I've already got 5 minutes under my belt, and we'll just carry on. It's fine. Jason Kenney's weighing in on the carbon tax bait and switch. He says Albertans are focused on protecting the lives and livelihoods to get through the COVID crisis. That's why it's hard to understand why the federal government is now focusing on making life much more expensive for everyone by quadrupling their carbon tax. Yeah, there's a lot of people who are upset about this. I talked about the Atlantic the Atlantic premiers. The Atlantic representatives from the Atlantic provinces, not the Atlantic premiers, their ministers, all wrote to the federal government to pressure them to rethink this plan too. That everybody thinks it's a bad plan. Here's Doug Ford. Ontario's weighing in too. So we got Jason Kenney, the Atlantic provinces, Ontario. Here's Doug Ford.
Holding the burden for what? We can protect the environment. I'm a strong believer of protecting the environment. But you don't have to protect the environment on the backs of the hardworking people of this province and this country at a time that people are barely holding on by their fingernails. And you want to throw a 30% cost of living increase onto the backs of the people that are working, and be it in the factories or the offices. I was floored when I heard this. A matter of fact, I couldn't believe it. I had to double check. And I just don't understand for the life of me why you want us to be uncompetitive when all provinces, we're competing for jobs up here. We're doing everything we can to create an environment for a company and people to thrive and prosper and grow. And all of a sudden, a sledgehammer comes and hits you over the head and says, now
you have to lock down your business because we can't prove it and whatever, but some cases are going up and we think that locking down your business will help, even though it hasn't helped for the last month. And don't ask us why or ask us for accountability. And this is happening until January 20th at least. Ha ha. So it seems odd, right? It seems odd for Doug Ford to be so incredulous about the federal government when he himself is imposing his will on a whole bunch of Ontario businesses, and they have virtually no recourse either. And I've heard lots of people saying it looks like the courts are going to be no real help because they can't get through the current docket, never mind the backlog, and never mind getting to these cases in a reasonable time. Like they're 2 years behind, basically. So good luck. You're on your own. The courts aren't going to help. But it's interesting. Doug Ford's trying to pantomime being for the people here. How dare you? Calls it a green scam. How dare you, Justin Trudeau? It seems like kabuki theater, right? It seems like the important issue is the businesses are being locked down. Our culture is being destroyed. Our economy is being held underwater as if you're holding down and drowning somebody in a bathtub, right? Like it's not quite dead yet, but if you don't let them up to breathe, they're going to be, right? This is Christmas, and Christmas doesn't come again for another year. And if you can't open your business or your restaurant or anything like that, a lot of people depend on their yearly salary. A lot of people have invested a lot of money in getting the product on the shelf. This is going to impact things. This is not going to be good, right? And yet Doug Ford, how dare you, federal government? 30%. What about 30% of nothing is nothing, right? Like if you don't have a business to pay taxes, this is not going to go well. I don't know who's going to be leading Ontario shortly, but I can't imagine this PC government carrying forward. People are not happy. And that's across the board. And there are a lot of frightened people, a lot of people who want direction, etc. But this kabuki theater, while refusing to address the impact, the negative impact of the lockdowns, the negative impact of the artificial 85% capacity limits, the impact of faulty testing, the impact of faulty death numbers, the impact of all of these things that are being done wrong, it's scaffolding out, right? Like it's just being built on top of it's a house of cards, and hopefully it crumbles. But I mean, my goodness, there's a lot of money and resources going into maintaining this house of cards, right? It's expensive to do the faulty PCR testing. It's expensive to shut down schools. It's destructive to our economy, to our culture, to have businesses just shut down by decree for who knows how long, so we can comply with who knows what. I keep seeing on Twitter people saying it's because we didn't follow the orders. It's because we didn't follow the direction. Who? There's me out there not wearing a mask. Everybody is doing what they're supposed to be doing, other than not visiting family, because people won't do that. They won't do it. You can threaten them within an inch of their lives. You can have police driving up and down the roads. people won't do it. They'll visit their family, they'll visit their friends, they'll have bubbles, they'll find ways around it. And then they'll feel kind of guilty and say, I guess we deserve to be locked down further. We don't. This is not appropriate. And Ford's pretend that he's standing up for you. Then if he wants to actually stand up for us, look at the data. Look at the data and respond to it. He hasn't. Not yet. Not once. Okay, now this is onto the China stuff. So Bill Blair's talking about Bugs Bunny. Sorry about that. Jump the gun there. Blah, blah. Here's an interaction on the House of Commons floor. Bill Blair says, we're not training Chinese troops, which drives an article saying, CTV News, Canadian military not training with Chinese troops, defense minister says. So this is where he says that. And then that is directly contradicted in the top secret documents that the Rebel News released, by the way. And this minister talks about that. I'll play a little bit of this, just the end of him and the minister's response. Here we go. And Bill Blair's response to the minister after he has his piece is exactly the same as the first one. It's virtually the same. They're blaming Harper. They're saying, oh, Harper signed on to do this. Harper did this in 2012 and 2013. Here we go.
I know that the Conservatives signed in 2013, Madam Speaker, but let me say once again, we do not train with the Chinese military.
Speaker, we know that the Prime Minister expanded that agreement for military training in 2017. And let's be clear, the invitation to the Chinese Army to come to Canada for winter training happened in February 2018 under this Liberal government. The hero in the story is the Chief of Defence Staff, who stood up for Canadian values and axed this Liberal government's plan. He should have been able to count on the Minister of National Defence to have his back. Unfortunately, the Defence Minister hid under his desk and let the Deputy Prime Minister walk all over him. Why did the Defence Minister allow the Deputy Prime Minister dictate military policy with communist China that compromises our national security?
And he goes back and does the same talking points. Very, very interesting. Jeff Buxley says, this is the Minister of Public Safety speaking out an outright lie. It was the Trudeau Liberal government and the Minister of National Defence that permitted the Chinese military to train in Canada, period. And yeah, very interesting. CTV is publishing what the defense minister says. Here's Scott Moe. I thought this was interesting. Our government is on track to open new international trade and investment offices in India, Japan, and Singapore in 2021, with a new managing director being hired for our offices in China. The responses to this tweet are very interesting. It's very interesting to see. These offices will strengthen our trade relationships, bring high quality, sustainable Saskatchewan products to the world. And hold on, let me find them. There are responses to the first tweet here, and it says, where can we see the info, what you are going to trade? We already have successful trade with those countries. Are you following Ford's plan? Will you pay Harper's son even more to go to Singapore from New York? Good or bad connections with China? I'm not certain. Premier Scott Moe's initiative in China seems out of step with Aaron O'Toole's vehement criticism of Justin Trudeau's Liberal policy on China, while the two Michaels are being held their third year as hostages. And there's more dissent in the comments. China needs to go. Infiltration at the highest levels. China is enemy number one right now. Don't even want to buy their junk anymore. I suppose you favor training in their army too. You've sure gone down that slippery slope. And there's more, right? So people are not upset, and they're calling these people out for making deals with people who seem to have infiltrated the highest levels. Now, the CCP is not necessarily a Chinese factory, right? But it seems like at the high levels of dealing government to government, should premiers be making international deals trade deals with countries like Communist China? Is that in our national best interest, right? Should they be touting those deals right after we see evidence of corruption up to the very top? I don't know. Evidence of our government training Chinese troops on our soil. Very, very interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff. Moving into COVID, because COVID is, all-encompassing these days, I suppose. Here's a tweet. It says, update. Around Twitter, I've seen people talking about how it's not responsible to keep schools open, despite the fact that there hasn't been any transmission from students to parents, from students to grandparents that I've seen, from students to students, students to teachers. Everybody seems pretty healthy. Everybody's been going to school. If there was a classroom that got a COVID case, the classroom gets shut down. But recently, these schools have been going to asymptomatic testing healthy people who don't have any symptoms at all. So they test you, and if you've got COVID, oh no, they're shutting down schools. They're shutting down schools after testing healthy people because they're not getting, enough people aren't being sick because we're not getting sick, right? Because this is, well, not what they're selling it to us as. So they're testing asymptomatically. This is happening in the States too, but here is a response. It says, a response to this tweet. This tweet says, updated thread on children and COVID summarizing recent research, new models, right? Summary, further evidence, children and adults are equally susceptible and similarly likely to transmit. Schools have been a driver of the second wave in Europe, Canada, and elsewhere. Sure. And this guy says, 3 systemic reviews and the WHO contradict the claims in this thread. And he links the 3 claims. Yet, a crafted message promoting fear that will harm kids for decades has 2,000 retweets. Unbelievable. And here's, schools are not drivers of COVID-19, given the adverse effect. The fact that global policy of incalculable consequence could be shaped by a Twitter thread that ignores dozens of studies and crafts a narrative like a fiction writer is simply staggering. And yet, I fear this is not the only example. Yeah, we've got teachers who are not healthcare professionals who have no idea what they're talking about other than following the news, and that does not make you an informed person, I'm sorry. Clamoring for a school closure. Well, I'm sorry, guys, you don't get an extra extended Christmas vacation because you just want it, right? This is not appropriate. Here's Miss Tam, and officials say urgent action needed as COVID-19 cases rise, right? I guess the Christmas is canceled didn't garner the needed effect. Everybody that I know has said, nobody's listening to this garbage. Nobody's listening to this bullshit. We're having Christmas like normal. And people are visiting and carrying on. And so here's Mark Towey's analysis of Miss Tam's, or Dr. Tam's statement. Short-term projections suggest there could be up to 14,920 deaths by December 25th. That's 126 deaths a day over the next 14 days. That was not sustained even at the height of the pandemic during the first wave. Not even close. Not even close. And yesterday, we had 45 deaths. I haven't seen an asterisk that says all 45 of these didn't happen actually yesterday, but I'm sure that there will be one. There was 35 deaths the day before, et cetera, et cetera. But you know what's interesting? If you compare to when we opened, and I can't remember the exact day we opened. There was a Twitter thread about it that gave the dates. Oh, December 11th, 45 COVID deaths. May 11th, 2020, 122 COVID deaths in Ontario. May 11th, okay. I don't know if that's true. May 11th, let's see if we can find it. May 9th, May 11th. It says 35 deaths on this chart. 35 deaths? I wonder where they got the 111. That's interesting. Anyway, 35 deaths on May 11th. And if you believe that, even though they were not accurate about their 135 number, if we started opening up on May 11th, we have 35 deaths and we're shutting down for 45 deaths? How could we possibly have things under control here with no masks? Masks came into effect in July, very little social distancing. How could we have things under control enough to start opening up here, and now we have to go into a lockdown here? I've said this before, it makes no sense. The numbers don't matter. It makes no sense. They don't care. Here is Guelph, or this is cases in Guelph. We have 9 in the hospital. Fatal cases 12. We had 11 up until a few days ago. If you're in Guelph and you know who died, or if you know how I can find out who died, I'd love to contact them to confirm it was a COVID death and not a something else death. How did they find out it was COVID? I would love to know. I'd be very interested to know. But all of our metrics, so this is Guelph, we're in lockdown red for 28 days now. Why 28 days? I don't know. I have no idea. No idea. But here's our what our health unit looks like. Cases, oh no, that's in the red. And the test positivity, that's in the red. Everything else is in the green or yellow. Non-EPI linked cases, green. Effective reduction number, 1.15, that's yellow. 82.5, that's acute occupancy, and intensive care occupancy is at 73.5%. We're at 100% capacity with our hospital, status green, and yet we're in red status, right? We're in red. Red control, right? This makes no sense. It doesn't matter what the reality of this is, right? And there are people pushing back. It doesn't matter what the reality of this is. Here's applesauce testing positive for COVID-19, and you can see the test here. We don't need that. Basically, she puts and then the C is positive, I suppose. And there you go. Applesauce tests positive for COVID-19. But people are pushing back. As I said, I'm not sure if these dates are accurate for opening up on May 11th. The numbers are not accurate. 122 COVID deaths. I don't know where that came from, so I'll have to find that out. Here's Cam Guthrie, the mayor of Guelph. He says, me, hey Guelph, there's some public health info you should all know about, so I'm posting it here. Okay, stay safe. And he says, trolls, COVID is fake, you suck. Me, I don't even care. And you know, it's really funny. Here's a meme that accurately describes kind of what's going on in the world of small business, right? I lost my job and I can't feed my kids. I'm drowning, right? This is the hand, and somebody's hand comes in to help them, and then it says, stay home, stay safe, save lives, high five, and then they drowned, right? And this is what is happening to small businesses currently, right? And Cam Guthrie doesn't care. You know, he's sending gifts like, I don't care. I don't even care, because he's describing anybody who disagrees with him as a troll. Right? Anybody who disagrees with him. I said the tests are fake. The data is fake. Where did the flu go? Listen to your citizens. Right? People are not happy with this. And this guy says, try being the person who has to update the Facebook group. I'm sure that would be a fun job. But the problem is, there are people who want to be heard who are being ignored. Right? Some people like what Mr. Guthrie's saying, but the likes aren't too many. There are a lot of people who are not happy either, right? So it's very interesting to see the divide, and I don't know. People are upset. I'm upset. I don't think that there's any need for what we're doing. I think that what we're doing is very harmful, in fact. I've been talking about how it's not fair that lockdowns unfairly shut small businesses. This is a conservative person saying, this is Gila Marto, and she says, statement on York Region lockdowns. The big box retailers should not get to enrich themselves on the backs of small businesses simply because they can afford to hire well-connected lobbyists like Melissa Lassman to get them preferential treatment. And here is the statement here. And the reason I'm showing it to you is it's got links in it. Okay, so I've got the link to this here. It says, since the beginning of this pandemic, I've always advocated to ensure we balance the need to keep people safe with measures that support small businesses. While I recognize and appreciate the need to limit large gatherings, I stand with Markham Mayor Frank Scapidi's call for further restrictions on big box retailers while allowing small businesses to remain open. And here's the link, and this is the reason I wanted you to have a link to it here.
Small business continue to operate under the restrictions they have today.
It's the first time I've heard that there any other suggestion of fairness other than having the big box retailers cordon off areas of their store and have the small businesses stay closed, and that's somehow fair. That's not fair. So I said this is fairness, but in thinking about it, I don't necessarily think it's fair. There's no reason to shut down. If it's safe to go to Walmart, it's safe to go to a small bookstore. If it's safe to go to Walmart or Costco or Zayres or any of the big grocery store chains, then it's safe to go to a small store like a dollar store or a jewelry store or trinket store or whatever. And this standing outside, if you convince yourself that standing outside waiting in line in the cold is a good idea somehow, you've cracked. You've gone around the bend. I don't think that this is the right move. I don't think this is for public health. I don't think this is good for people. I don't think this is good for business. I don't think any of this stuff should be happening. I want to be really clear. I want to return to normal. I want to return fully to normal. I've talked about how yesterday I was saying, with some small restrictions, blah, blah, blah. I think your average everyday Canadian will place restrictions on themselves for a long time after the government waves the all clear, if the government ever waves the all clear. But I am in full support of a complete and full return to normal, 100% normal, because there's no reason to have any of these restrictions at all. This is trying to play a game within imaginary parameters, right? And they ever-changing expectations, right? May 11th, you've got 35 deaths. Time to open up, everyone. No problem. 35 deaths, we can handle that. December 11th, 45 deaths. Shut it all down. Shut it all down right now. Shut it all down. Because why? Because all the indications are looking like it's terrible? No, not really. Nope. No, everything's pretty okay. We got 9 people in the hospital, and we got lots of capacity, 73% in our intensive care unit, and 18%, 17.5% in our regular acute care occupancy. We got lots of room. No problem. But you know what? Shut everything down. Destroy the economy. What the heck? It's so crazy. It's so crazy. Okay? So I wanted to be really clear. There are people who are trying to change the game, who are trying to say, within these parameters, these rules don't make sense. And I'm trying to give them a little bit of boost, because at least they're realizing that there's something wrong with this, right? A plus B doesn't equal 7, okay? Right? Like, these people are saying, there's something wrong here. There's something a little weird about these rules. So yay, at least they're waking up a little bit, right? But the reality of this whole thing is, we need a fire hose to clean house, right? We don't need just a pressure washer. We need a fire hose and like 12 to 15 strong people to hold the fire hose. Living is much more than not dying, Mark Toey says. I just want to highlight this. He says, but just for a moment, step back and see all your other constituents who are not dying from COVID-19, not gasping for air, and realize that they are at risk too, not just from the virus, but also from the consequences of your decisions, the ramifications of what you're forcing them to do. Remember, life is for living. Human beings are tribal species. We have survived, we have evolved over the centuries by working together as societies, as civilizations, as communities, as tribes. In every great crisis, in every war, and every disaster, we have survived and overcome by pulling together. That's what we do. That's what humans need. But in this crisis, we're being told to stay apart, to live alone, to suffer in silence. That's not what humans do. Frankly, it's not sustainable. It's not healthy. It's not helping. It's hurting and killing us. This is not the way to beat this crisis. Our plans must reflect the true scope of the problem. This is not just a medical crisis. It's not just about a virus. The virus is not touching many lives directly, but our response to the virus is affecting everyone. The reality is most people do not know anyone who has had COVID-19. Most people do not suffer from the virus. Most of those who do get it, the virus recover completely. Those who have horrible long-term effects from the virus or die with it are a fraction of a percent of the population. Yet we are imposing unnatural, ruthless restrictions on 100% of the population. Restrictions that are causing real harm. Physicians, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Suicides are up since the pandemic restrictions were put into place. Access to routine medical care is down, and that means thousands of people who have not been diagnosed with life-altering or life-threatening illness, thousands of therapies and treatments not begun, thousands of surgeries not performed. Those delays will inevitably cost thousands of lives. Millions of Canadians have been forced out of their jobs, even with generous public financial support for them. It does not replace the financial loss of income. It does not reduce the burden of new debts accumulating during unemployment. These people and their families will never fully recover from the financial hole they've been thrown into. Many of these unemployed Canadians will suffer an enduring period of poverty. Those public health mandarins who warn of the danger of the virus have spent the last many decades warning us of all the negative health consequences of poverty. Poor people suffer greater health challenges. They live shorter lives. Every Canadian forced into poverty from pandemic-induced joblessness or debt will lose years off their life. We can't stop living in order to prevent dying. I scroll down. When we shut down our economy, we shut down our ability to help each other. We shut down our ability to live together. We shut down our ability as human beings to shape our skills, to share our wealth with one another. We cannot live like this as a species. We cannot survive long like this as individuals. Life is more than surviving COVID. It must be more. I agree with Mr. Toy. And we have to hold our leadership accountable when they tweet ridiculous gifs, right? When they say things like, oh, everybody who disagrees with me is a troll, and tweet gifs like this, that's an immature reaction. That's poor leadership, okay? This is not taking your constituents seriously, and that's a serious offense. It should be taken seriously. People's concerns and livelihoods should be taken seriously. This is the stuff of nightmares. Moving on. I don't want to link to the videos. There's the videos here. I watch them. They're effective videos, but this is terrifying, right? This scared me when I was a kid. The Roby, the robot guy who lost his arm, right? I'm a robot and I can lose my arm and you can't, right? Oh no, right? I can put it back on. This terrified me when I was a kid, and maybe it didn't terrify you, but it terrified me. I was like, I don't know, young enough to be afraid by that. But this thing, can you imagine showing a child this thing? Like, this is the stuff of nightmares. This isn't good. Like, I don't like this. I think that this is your tax dollars at work. If this was from like a foreign country, we'd be not making fun of it, but like going, wow, glad we didn't pay for that. But this is Alberta, right? Alberta unveils menacing COVID-19 mascot in new ad campaign. The idea is to scare you. This isn't about a virus. The idea is to scare you into compliance. Be afraid of the virus, right? If you're not afraid of it, show this to your kids. They will be afraid of it, right? It's crazy. It's unbelievable. The cost of the coronavirus vaccine will be covered by federal government and will be free for all Canadians. When do we get our refund checks? right? Who's paying for this? That's wonderful. That's nice of Justin Trudeau and Irving, right? Isn't it Irving that he's part of? Maybe not. Maybe he's just friends with Irving. Anyway, he's got lots of money in oil and gas across the Atlantic provinces. That's where Pierre Trudeau made his money, right? So very interesting that he's saying that it's going to be free. People who don't realize I'm being sarcastic, I understand that there's one taxpayer, and the taxpayer pays for this free vaccine, right? This is not free. It will be rolled into the billions and billions of debt and deficit that we have to pay back, and we have to pay that back. Make no mistake. This irresponsible spending spree on the back of this irresponsible prime minister. I have other choice words, but I'll leave them be for now. Will cost us dearly. Is going to cost us money. And we need somebody in there who's on Canada's side to stop the bleeding. And make no mistake, we're still bleeding. Here's Pierre Poilievre, and he says, I asked Ms. Freeland for data on how wealthy investors are profiting off the Bank of Canada's money printing. She said, ask the bank. So I proposed a motion at the Finance Committee to do that. Liberals in the Bloc voted it down. What are they hiding? Everything. Everything. They're hiding everything. Pierre Poilievre continues, the government says it will spend 70 billion to 100 billion without details, and it barely merits a mention on page 12 of the Budget Watchdog's report because it's the new normal to blast money out the door without caring where it goes. Yay! Yay! Right? We get to spend a bunch of money for no reason at all. 70 to 100 billion dollars when all the businesses have been destroyed, decimated. And I mean, I wonder what our currency will be worth when the economy is finally ready to reopen, according to Ms. Freeland. In the chamber, yesterday was the last day of the House sitting. Trudeau was not there because he was doing his carbon tax announcement that we started the show with. And so what they were talking about in the House, all of this, I'm just putting this in here because it seems crazy. Like what they're talking about, statements by members, oral questions, routine proceedings, government orders, government bills, private members' business, adjourning the House, right? Very, very benign kind of sounding day, but nothing of real consequence happened yesterday, really. Like you'd think in the middle of a crisis, there'd be some urgency to getting things done. And the urgency to getting things done seems to be in robbing Canadians of as much of their wealth through taxes that we should be thankful that we get the privilege of being able to pay, right? That's kind of where they're at, right? Like you better be thankful about this. That's where the urgency is here. They couldn't even, here it is, Commons adjourns without resolving dispute over how it should resume in the new year. Yeah, how do we come back 6 weeks in a pandemic, right? Like, yeah, sure, why not? We'll figure it out when the House reopens. How do we do that? I don't know. We'll figure it out. Somebody will send an email or something, right? Yesterday, I had a bunch of people. I went to my brother's house yesterday evening, and we usually hang out on Friday nights. And a bunch of people started to text me saying, that's it. Trump is done. Moving out of Canadian politics into international politics, specifically U.S. election. Trump's done, right? The Supreme Court dismissed the Texas lawsuit. They dismissed the Texas lawsuit. Isn't that interesting? And I thought, why would they do that? That's very interesting. They said they would take it up, and then a bunch of states joined it, and they said, yeah, they're wrong. This is election fraud, blah, blah, blah. And then the Supreme Court dismissed it. So I thought, that's interesting. Trump tweeted this out yesterday. Today's the 12th, obviously. And he says, December 11th, I just want to stop the world from killing itself. So sometimes the most powerful man in the world can feel a little bit powerless, right? Very interesting. However, the reason that the Supreme Court, here's Amir Tarsfadi, sorry if I've got that wrong. He says, SCOTUS didn't reject the claim of fraud. It rejected the idea that a state has not been affected by the one to complain here. In other words, we can only deal with fraud claims brought by people from places where it actually happened. So apparently, and maybe this is speculation, who knows, but it's a standing issue. The people who brought the suit against Pennsylvania didn't have standing in the case. So you have to have standing to bring a case against the Supreme Court. They didn't dismiss the fraud case. They dismissed the standing case. So the standing in the case that was brought. So this could be precedent setting. If something happens and Trump is handed the win, this means that blue states can't sue red states for their election results. I don't know if that was necessary. I don't know. Who knows? But does it mean Trump has lost and has no pathway? I don't think so. I don't think so. The Supreme Court hasn't made a ruling one way or the other. They said this one doesn't have standing. So what's the obvious next step? It's a setback. Make no mistake, it's a setback. But Ruth Bader Ginsburg Trump placing 3 Supreme Court judges was unexpected, right? He had one because of Gorsuch, or because Obama, I think it was Neil Gorsuch who was placed. It was Merrick Garland that Obama, and I forgot that last time, but Merrick Garland that Obama nominated, and Trump put in Gorsuch. So he had one. But you can't count on one in a Supreme Court of 9 if you know that Chinese infiltration has been going on for decades, right? So you can't count on one Supreme Court justice to make sure that your plan, whatever your plan is, and I think that the plan was to let them steal the 2020 election, is going to work. So I don't necessarily think that this leans on SCOTUS. I think it's an extra avenue, because Trump did get 3, and maybe that's enough. Maybe the Supreme Court isn't as infiltrated as you have to plan that it is, right? Like, you can't plan for a win in a place like the Supreme Court where you don't have control, right? So was the Supreme Court part of the plan? I don't know. I have no idea. But it seems that here's Sidney Powell, and she is not Trump's legal team, but she's filing motions for people with standing. She says, pay attention. We made emergency filings in the Supreme Court tonight. That's yesterday. For Georgia and Michigan. We'll be filing Arizona and Wisconsin shortly. These cases raise constitutional issues and prove massive fraud. Our plaintiffs have standing. We the people will not allow rigged elections. So, who knows what's going to happen? I don't know what's going to happen. You have to think about this in terms of a war, and I think I've made this comparison before. Like, sometimes you don't take the bridge when you think you're going to take the bridge. Sometimes you don't take the city when you think you're going to take the city. Looking at World War II comparisons, right? And in a situation like that, looking at the timeline, people say, oh, there's no time at all, right? And the constitutional dates are noon on January 20th, and there's a lot of time between now and then. There's a lot of interesting things that could happen between now and then. And Trump's got cards that he hasn't played yet that have been kind of forgotten about, right? So we'll see. We'll see. I'm not ready to lose faith yet. Certainly a setback yesterday, but like I said, I don't know that you can count on the Supreme Court for a win. And there's so many different avenues of bringing these cases. Now, if the Supreme Court completely shuts it down, I don't want to necessarily see martial law. The 2018 executive order signed by Trump gives military power to implement certain actions on Trump's say-so. So, I mean, he's got power to implement stops to certain things. Do I think he's going to use them? I have no idea. We're a little while out from that yet, I think. There's still legal recourse here. So we're going to see how this legal recourse plays out, and then we'll see what Trump does. Do I think he's going to be a shrinking violet and go away? No. If Trump is not inaugurated January 20th, Trump knows that there are the apparatus of the U.S. military and government and everything will be coming after him under Biden. Taxes, everything will be under a microscope. The media will continue their 24-hour Trump hate. It'll be retribution against Trump and his supporters for 2020 and beyond, right? And they've been open about that. That's not even controversial. That's just what they've openly promised, right? Like, oh, don't you dare support Trump. We're coming for you, right? So it's very interesting. We'll see how this plays out. We'll see. I don't know. So thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co. And have a wonderful, wonderful day.